Welcome everyone to our webinar on the funding opportunities for energy efficiency and sustainable transport. And the funding opportunities are provided by an exceptional funding schemes called ELENA. My name is Riccardo Scarinci, and I'm the national contact points at Euresearch for ICT and transport. I'm here with my colleague Stefan Fischer, also national contact point at Euresearch for the thematic area for small medium enterprise, energy and Euratom.
Hello.
The goal of today is to give you the possibility to access this unique funding opportunity called the European Local Energy Assistance, ELENA in short. That is a funding opportunity that covers three main areas. One is on energy efficiency, the other is on sustainable residential, and finally on urban transport and mobility. This unique funding program is provided in collaboration by the European Investment Bank and the European Commission to give you access to a catalyst to have projects developed in these three fields. As you can see from this map, the program is open since many years and with several projects in all European countries. You can see right in the middle, although there is a gap. And this is the gap that we want to fill now. We want to give you access as Swiss participant to these incredible funding opportunities. And we really hope that at the end of this webinar, you will have a clear idea of a project that will receive support from ELENA. To reach this goal, we prepared the following agenda. We have the great honor to have Reinhard Six from the European Investment Bank do a presentation on ELENA itself and give us all the details of what ELENA is about. And then we will have two great testimonials of successful projects in ELENA. One on the field of energy efficiency by Carlo Bonza, and the other one on the field of urban transport and mobility from Lutz Heuser. So all the speakers are from different countries, and now, given the current situation, we are all based in 4 different countries. So this shows you also the European dimension of this funding scheme. Finally, there will be a question and answer session in which your answer will be answered. You can always write your questions in the chat function of Zoom, and then my colleague Stefan will select, given the time restriction, the most answer that we can, the more question that we can answer. We are working at Euresearch, that is the Swiss guide to European research and innovation funding. We are a network of offices based all over Switzerland. So thus, independently from where you are based, there is an office that is close to you. Stefan and I are based in Bern, but please contact us not only for the question related to ELENA, but in general, if you have research and innovation ideas in all fields and you want to access European funding. What we offer to you is information events, for example, this one in which we give you information on the funding opportunities, but also we can give you one-to-one advice up to proposal review of your idea, research and innovation idea. And finally, we try to connect among researchers and innovators at the European levels. So please contact us if you have research and innovation idea that you want to follow up. Many of you maybe already knows us for the program Horizon 2020, which is the European framework for research and innovation action. And is here where you usually find transport and energy calls. I want to stress that ELENA is under the general umbrella of Horizon 2020, but is a unique funding opportunities. So please put aside the information that you have, the knowledge that you have about Horizon 2020, and listen careful on the presentation of Reinhard. He will give us the real spirit of ELENA and what ELENA wants to achieve. That is not what the typical call of Horizon 2020 try to achieve. So now, without further ado, I leave the floor to Reinhard Six from the European Investment Bank. So please, Reinhard, unmute your microphone, and he will give us an introduction to ELENA and what the aim is for.
Thank you very much, Ricardo, for this opportunity to present the ELENA facility also in Switzerland. Indeed, on the map, it's a white spot, but as Switzerland is participating, as you rightly insisted, on the in the Horizon 2020 program, you can also participate or have access to this facility. Indeed, it's a little bit special. You see a little bit the different subjects I want to present to you in this webinar session. So, what is ELENA? Who can benefit, etc. So perhaps we can jump right away to the slides. What is ELENA? Because I think this is the most interesting subject. As Ricardo said, it was established in 2009, so it's already more than. And it's a kind of cooperation between the European Investment Bank and the European Commission. The Commission makes available the money, and which we manage on behalf of the Commission. The idea was based on a kind of gap analysis that we have seen also as a bank, that the projects needs to be prepared, well prepared, in order that we are available, or that is possible for the banks, for example, to invest in such projects. So there was, the gap is basically how to prepare good projects, investment projects, so that they can be financed and implemented also in the end. And this gap, to cover this gap, or to reduce this gap, the ELENA facility was created. Can we have the next slide, please, Ricardo? Yes. No, yeah. Well, let's stay on that. It's fine, it's fine, it's fine. Just the last point. I mean, this grant is there for preparing investments. So it's not a grant which gives grants for the implementation, for the investment itself. This is very important. It's really the upfront, the upstream phases which are necessary, for example, to design the projects, to carry out, for example, energy audits, to prepare tender documents, to make tender evaluations, signing contracts, etc. All this upfront work can be supported by ELENA in order to make these investments happen. Please, next slide. So it's really for three sectors, I would say, the project development support, as we call it in our jargon. It's energy efficiency in buildings, linked to buildings, local renewables also linked to buildings. Basically, the focus is on buildings, but also clean urban transport. These are the three sectors. What can be supported? I will go a little bit into it later on. It's energy audits, tender preparation, but also financial advice. So how can investments be financed, especially if you're in the order of magnitude of several million of euros of investment? You need to really think about and see what are the most advantageous financing solutions which you can also have access to as an investor, as a project implementer. What we also want to see is big investments. I mean, we want to see for projects which are submitted to ELENA at least an investment of 30 million euros. It has not been one single investor, it can be different investors, but we need to have a program which represents 30 million euros, because also this is coming a little bit from the logic of Horizon 2020. We want to create also a market replication, because this should show how projects can be implemented, also larger scale or aggregated smaller scale projects, in order to show to others that this is feasible and that this can be replicated by other players or stakeholders in the market. The grant can cover up 90% of the cost related to project development. So, but this is a little bit, there are some strings attached. I mean, this is not all costs which you usually have in Horizon 2020. This is a little bit different. Also, what is different, we have an allocation first come, first serve principle, because we don't have this logic of calls as you have normally in Horizon 2020, because here we talk investment, and this is the next point, this grant you will receive only, and really I insist, we will receive it only if you really implement also investments. So it's not for preparing studies, energy audits and things which afterwards stay on the shelf and nothing happens, or you organize webinars or other seminars or produce brochures or websites. This is not the target of this ELENA facility, but it's really to prepare investments. So what we have here, it's a kind of performance obligation, which is different compared to Horizon 2020, where we require a leverage factor. So for sustainable energy projects, it's 20. Then we have a lower one for residential buildings and for urban transport. So take the simple example, you will get 1 million euros of grant. So for sustainable energy projects, we want to see at the end of 3 years, 20 million euros invested. If you don't succeed in 20 million, but only take the half, it's easier to calculate. If you only reach 10 millions, you will only get 500,000 euros of grants, even if you have spent more. So this is really a kind of a double obligation. You have to spend it on activities which are eligible for project development support. And second, you need to have a leverage factor at the end. So the testimonies of the two projects in the next session. So I think this is interesting to listen also how they manage this. What is also important, I think I already said it, final beneficiaries do not have to be the one who implement investments. So this can be others, it can be aggregators. We have, I think, both projects which will be presented afterwards are in this situation where they aggregate for others. What is important, but to understand, and this is linked to the point above, to the obligation of performance, is that the one who signs up with us, so who signs with the European Investment Bank, has the obligation to deliver. He cannot hide behind other partners, so saying, yeah, well, they did not do the job, or they had different decisions, political changes, etc. This is not acceptable. So you have really a kind of obligation, and this is, I think, feasible. I mean, you can see afterwards in our website we have a number of projects. We are now at a total more than 100, but it's a challenge, and you need to have, if you want to present a project, you have to think about how this can be organized and how can this work out. What are the risks and how you can also manage this risk. So just some figures. We have 100 projects, more than 100 projects ongoing or completed. 186 million euros were allocated. What we look at is, I mean, this is the famous leverage factor. We have, with this is, our investments are foreseen of 6.4 million euros. So this is quite an amount. And this is one of the indicators also the Commission is looking quite eagerly to it. And also how much energy was saved. So it's quite a large amount now. We are in the terawatt hours, also renewable energy generation, and in particular also CO2 emissions. So we are in the order of maybe 1.7 million tons, annual tons reduced. Projects, some examples here now, energy efficiency in public and residential buildings, street lighting, this is the one SF will present. Development of district heating networks, we have several in the Netherlands, in Denmark, but also installation of roof PV plants, so building related renewables. In clean urban transport, we have electric buses, ferries, vehicles. And what is interesting, also the partners, as we call it, the beneficiaries of ELENA grants are very different. I mean, you have local, regional, now we have also national authorities, we have public entities, we have energy agencies, banks, non-profit organizations. We have also to a more limited amount companies. But as I said, we are looking really at the leverage factor, at this performance obligation. And this is sometimes quite a challenge for companies, and especially for small and medium-sized companies. So it's not a program to support really the development of startups, etc. it's not the purpose of ELENA. There are other programs which are much more better suited for this. And we also support, for example, new innovative approach like energy performance contracting. I don't know how this is spread in Switzerland, but also one-stop shops, for example, for residential buildings, for refurbishment of residential buildings is quite asked for, and is an interesting sector for supporting investments. The overall leverage factor for the moment is at 36. It will go down a little bit, but it shows quite a strong capacity of using grant money in order to generate investments. Next slide, please. Here you see the different projects on a map. So it's an interactive map, so you can go into our website and see what is happening and what are the different characteristics of the projects. What do they do? How they use the grant money? For which purposes? What are the leverages they will achieve or have achieved? And also, what are the sizes, for example, how many grants did they get? So it's quite interesting. It's a good source of inspiration also to see how ELENA grants are used and can be used. Next slide, please. So what are the benefit? Who can benefit? I already developed a little bit. I just to insist a little bit on that it's not very restrictive. So it's quite large. We have regional authorities, local authorities. We have also groupings of such authorities. We have, for example, a lot in Italy. There were a lot of provinces which wanted to support investments in their territory. But we have also regions and national entities in smaller countries, for example, ministries. So it's quite linked to the objectives of the ELENA applicant and what he wants to do and how he can do it. This is the interesting thing. But we also have, it was opened up to private entities. We have associations, for example. We have also entities which are mixed public-private banks. What is important for private entities, this ELENA should not generate any generation of profit for the activities which are supported by ELENA. Okay, next slide, please. So here we come now more to the details. What kind of are eligible investment programs? As I already said, it's a renovation of public and private buildings, energy efficiency. This is really the main target. If you look at the statistics also, it's the most of the projects are going into this for this sector. Then we also have very often integration of renewable energy sources, being, for example, photovoltaic, or changes in the heating system, for example, replacing fuel or gas boilers by district heating, or by renewable, by wood, for example, pellets or wood chip boilers. Then we also have investments in district heating, energy efficient or efficient district heating or cooling networks, not so often, but it's more district heating. But also local energy facilities, for example, smart grids. We have now one project from a water and wastewater treatment entity in Ireland to support the improvement of distribution of drinking water and also wastewater treatment. So, as I said, the investment programs implemented can be by the one who received the grant, as we call it, by the final beneficiary, or the final beneficiary can support other ones, which afterwards will implement the investment. Next slide, please. Urban transport and mobility, I think this is quite important also. As Ricardo introduced this, it's really innovative solutions which should be supported, going beyond the current state of art for alternative fuels, for example, urban mobility, but also big focus currently is on vehicles, especially electric vehicles, recharging infrastructure, and also in more general terms, energy efficiency measures and systems. Next slide, please. Residential buildings, it's basically more or less the same as for public buildings. It's really more targeted to have to support help the building the homeowner in the journey from having the idea to improve the building to the investment, to the implementation, and also eventually to the financing. So it's similar to the public and tertiary buildings. Next slide, please. What are the eligible costs? Basically, we have only two cost categories. It's staff, so staff which is assigned to the project, and the cost, the staff cost, the remuneration-related costs, and social security charges. And then we have, as we call it, external experts. It's feasibility, design, market studies. It's energy audit, structuring of projects, business plans, or finalizing business plans. But it's also legal and financial advice. For example, energy performance contracting. Very often you need legal advice for the contracts, but also preparing the tendering procedures, especially in the public sector. This can be quite a challenge sometimes. But and what we also support, it's really bundling of smaller projects to reach a level where where these projects are bankable. So these are the main cost categories. We don't support overheads, travel expenses, etc., because we wanted to really focus on the expenses which are really necessary for the project development service. This is different compared to the Horizon 2020. So the boundaries, cost boundaries, are smaller compared to Horizon 2020. Next slide, please. So here you see a little bit the application process. In general, we advise people or applicants to start with a pre-application. So that's 2 to 3 pages in order to put down a little bit the ideas, so not a full application, because this can be quite time consuming, and we don't want to spend or ask applicants to spend time on things which in the end will not fly or are not eligible. So we have an initial check of eligibility, and once this is okay, then we invite the applicant to prepare a first application. In general, there are some back and forth, refining, etc. And at one moment we say, okay, this is sufficiently precise and acceptable, and this is the final application. And then we present it to the Commission, because the Commission has the last word. They have to give it okay for applications which are presented to them. And if they give the okay, then we start the preparation of the funding agreement. Once the funding agreement is signed, the project really can start. Also, the expenses start at this moment. They cannot start before. So this is really a crucial point to have in mind. In general, it takes, if you are very fast, is 6 months, but the average is more or less a year. It depends on really how well you have prepared, how well you are in the logic of ELENA, and what we need to see in order to assess this, and see also what we look really basically is the probability of implementation, because the grant is there, but we are not very glad, or we are not eager to recover money, basically. This is not our main purpose. So we want to see that this really flies and goes through, and in the end, the funded beneficiary can present to us investments which are eligible. Perhaps the next slides, I think these are the ones which the examples, but I think we can go a little bit faster because we have afterwards examples. This one is, I think, interesting because it was the city in Ljubljana in Slovenia, which used this mainly for preparing energy performance contracts, and they succeeded in investing 49 million euros with this, and they received support of 1 million euro. And here it's interesting to see how the city really used this opportunity to implement energy performance contracts, which are more complicated. I don't want to go into detail how this is set up. Basically, it's a contract where the private entity, which will be which will deliver services and investments, engages also on energy savings, which are really contractually afterwards an obligation. That's why I think it's an interesting model of implementing energy efficiency measures. The next slide, please. Here we have one which is in France. This is a kind of one-stop shop in Picardie, in the northern part of France, where they had a kind of hand-holding process for households. You see 1,240 homeowners were assisted. The investment amount reaches 33.5 million euros. So 20 divided by 20, it was 1.667 million euros ELENA grant. And also this entity made available financing, because the French entity wanted to have a kind of one-stop shop with everything Also the financing, and this was made available through the European Investment Bank. It's also an interesting cooperation at looking at the financing of the investments, because very often this is a crucial point to take also into account. And the last slide, last example, it's the smart mobility concept in Amsterdam. It's a little bit different than what you will present afterwards. It's really the public transport entity, exploitatie, I don't know it's pronounced in Dutch, but they want to implement regenerative braking energy systems for the metro. Then they want to set up an IT backbone for all the different systems, in order to have a kind of cooperation and aggregation and also exchange of information and data. What is also interesting, hardware from a hardware point of view, they want to purchase 67 electric buses, including the charging infrastructure. And also, as they have a lot of water and channels in canals in Amsterdam, they want to also to purchase hybrid plug-in electric harbor ferries. Here you see the ambition is quite substantial on the investment program. Also the grant, it's quite important. This is more the upper limit of grants. And they have made progress, and it's interesting if they will deliver the full or only part of it, because contractual binding is based on the grant, the factor 20. It's not necessarily the targets which you have set in the beginning. Okay, next slide, and I think then I'm over. Thank you for your attention, and you see below the link to the website, so if you want to have more information afterwards, you can come and have a look at that. Thank you, Ricardo.
So Ricardo, you have to unmute your microphone.
Yeah, right now it should be good.
Thank you, Stefan. So thank you very much, Reinhard. I'm very glad to hear about this funding opportunity. It's really complementary to whatever other funding opportunities are there. And it's incredible to see how he really managed to be a catalyst to bring actually to reality extremely interesting project in energy efficiency and smart mobility to the people. And also how easy and helpful is the application process, in which the feeling is that actually there is a will from the other side to make this project happen. So thank you very much for your effort on this. We now move to the first testimonial, Dr. Carlo Bonza from the Consorzio Energia Veneto in Italy, and he will show us successful energy projects in ELENA, actually more than one, thanks to his large experience on this. So without further ado, I leave the floor to Carlo.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. I'm here to witness the effectiveness of ELENA program. I've been working in 4 different projects in Northern Italy. So we started with Milano 10 years ago, something like this, and still going on. I participated as financial expert in Milano, in Padua, in Verona, and currently also in Venice. All 4 projects were aimed at the energy requalification of buildings and public lighting systems. So we didn't use funds for mobility at the moment. As you probably already know, in this project, we use normally the EPC framework. We adopted this framework, and you can see it shown in my first slide. Of course, this is very, very simplified, just to explain how it's working and the effectiveness also of this program and framework. Starting from the previously calculated baseline, so is the left part of the slide, you can have the current cost, so the fuel and the electrical energy, yeah, and then taking into account the savings offered and the adjustments due to the case of over and under performance, which will increase or decrease the fee for the contractor, you arrive to the final result of the fee that you have to pay to contractor, to the awarding company. So this model is working in an adjustable way. What we want, obviously, to guarantee in every way is that there will be no extra charges for beneficiaries. Okay? This is absolutely our focus at the moment. So the municipalities in our case, because what we supported was always energy efficiency for municipalities, buildings and electrical plants, will have to pay the residual expenses for the purchase of gas and electricity and the fee to the awarding company. This is the EPC main structure. Of course, a lot of passages in the middle are missing at the moment, but this is just a simplification of what's the use of an EPC. Of course, we use EPC together with PPP also, so public and private partnership. Of course, there are also fluctuations in energy costs. We know the prices of energy, they are changing during the period. EPC means energy performance contract. Okay. But we immediately ask also for a certain percentage of economic savings for the beneficiary. So you can see it in red in my slide over there. At the end, the beneficiary, the municipalities in our case, will have to pay annually a fee that is slightly reduced if compared with the historical one. Going on, we can see also the results that we got in Italy regarding the 4 projects that I've been working on. I ask Mr. Riccardo to move to the second slide, please. Then if you have questions about the EPC framework or PPP or whatever, I will be available for you, no problem, at your disposal. I forgot to tell you one thing that is very important. Obviously, there are also several adjustment factors due to, for example, climatic changes. Okay, so you can have a winter time colder or warmer, depending on that, or difference also in the use of buildings compared to the previous year. So you can decide that this building for 1 year will not be in use. Of course, this doesn't mean that you reduced your consumption of 100%. Yes, it is, but it is not due to the refurbishment action you made. Okay? So the first project I've been working on was in the province of Milano. I live over there, and we started in 2011, so it's about 10 years ago, 9-10 years ago. Milano was a pilot project for Italy, but not only for Italy. It was the second project in Europe, just after Barcelona. So at that time, the situation was not so easy. Just because there was no experience in Italy about EPC project. The experience were very, very low, and the diffidence regarding this project was very, very strong at the moment. It was not easy to obtain good results, and the efforts were truly, truly remarkable at that time. Just because almost nobody knew the EPC formula, and the mistrust both from the municipalities but also from the private stakeholders, was very strong. Nobody could conceive that a building, for example, could be refurbished without investing and get savings immediately from the first year. So they start looking at you as you tried to cheat them and thinking, where's the trick of that? And that was absolutely amazing. At the end, we obtained an important outcome from this project, because the energy savings, we were only talking about buildings. We didn't have electrical traffic lighting. The energy savings arrived up to 35%, and the leverage factor was 26. At that time, the requested leverage factor was 25. And so we overcame the minimum, but it was a challenge, absolutely a challenge at the time. And the level of investment was 18 million, roughly. The second one was the province of Padua. In that case, we had public lightings and buildings too. The obtaining investment at the closure of the project with EIB was 46 million. The energy savings, 32% on buildings and 73% on lighting system. You may think that this 73% is incredible, but you will see later on that we have also better figures. The leverage factor was very interesting, near 35. When we arrived to the project closure, we obtained extra investments by municipalities in the alpine zone of Belluno, nearby the borders of Austria, with Austria. So we obtained another extra 26 million investment. So the real final leverage factor was 53.8. So absolutely a very good result. The next one was the CEB consortium in Verona. Well, this consortium is very large. It has something like 1,100 municipalities all over Italy, from the northern Italy to Sicily, okay? In this case, we were talking about, sorry, I'm reading the question. To reach such high leverage factor, maybe I lost something before. In any case, okay, in this example, which entity invested it to reach such high leverage factor? While the investment, the expenditure on ELENA funds were around 1.4 million. We had financial funds for 2.1 million, but we didn't use them completely. We used only 1.4. Therefore, the results were absolutely interesting, we can say. So coming back to CEB consortium, we only made public lighting. The consortium has more than 1,100 municipalities all over Italy associated, and we made public lighting systems. The obtaining investment are at the moment 28 million, but the results are still coming at the moment, just because this project was closed at the end of 2019. So many bidding procedures are still going on, and the results are coming at the moment. The energy savings on public lighting are always very, very, very interesting. And in this case, we are talking about 75%. So absolutely incredible. And the leverage factor is not so high in this case, 22.3 million, just because the level of investment on public lighting is not so high as for buildings. So we are talking about the refurbishment of lamps mainly. That is the best way to obtain an immediate saving on electricity consumption. The last one has been closed recently, and we are talking about the province of Venice, okay? In this case, we had public lighting and buildings together. We had something like 20 different municipalities joined together for this project. The obtained investment was around 40 million. The energy savings of building, it was incredible, 55%. And the energy savings on lighting system, 87%. So near 90% of savings on electricity consumption on public lighting systems. The leverage factor is very, very interesting, more than 56. So everybody is very scared when we start this project about the leverage factor requested by EIB. But going on, you will see if you join those projects that is not so difficult. All the projects that I know that I have been working, no, the leverage factor is not linked to energy savings. It's linked to investments. It's linked to investments and to really used financial funds, ELENA financial funds. So just to make you an example, if you use 1 million financial funds, ELENA financial funds, and you get 20 million investment, you got 20 leverage factor, okay? So it's very, very easy to calculate.
Thank you very much, Carlo. It's really a pleasure to see
if I have 2 minutes,
results.
I will go on with something more, just to explain how the work is organized inside this project. But if you prefer, we can go with question and answers.
We'll go on the question and answer. The attention span, unfortunately, during a webinar is very limited. So we'll move on, then will be more time in the next session. So I was saying thank you very much, Carlo. It's a real pleasure to see the results that you managed to achieve with this incredible energy saving figure, so important for the current situation. So now we move to the next speaker, and he will tell us again a successful project on the transport sector, on the urban mobility services. So thank you very much, Lutz, for being with us, and we'll leave the floor to you.
Thank you, Ricardo. It's a pleasure to be with you today to share about our activity in the context of ELENA. This is the UI group. We are focused on climate change support for cities, named Smart Cities initiatives. Since our foundation in 2012, our philosophy is that the combination of building districts, mobility, and digitalization will help to foster these challenging goals. This is in line with the European Innovation Partnership on Smart City and Communities, the EIP, not the EIB. And the EIP on Smart City has developed a collaboration with the EIB, particularly to address some of the challenges that we have identified, and UI was among the first that worked on this towards the urban mobility solutions. I like to go quickly through the challenge that we are addressing, our approach, and then specifically on the project we're referring to. So this is all known to you for a while, that there is a lot of challenges in urbanization. This is why the EIP was put in place, because anything we can do there will largely help to foster the goals. When it was formed in 2012, the goals of 2020 were in focus, and we can now conclude that we haven't been able, as the European Union, to meet our 2020 goals, looking for the 2030 goals. And within that, it's important to understand that the complexity we're dealing with is quite huge. We saw already a number of examples. Here's another long list of examples. And so it's important to understand, how do we foster all of that into one? Now, our approach as UI group is to deal with the digitalization as the integrating element. We call it, in the European Innovation Partnership, the integrated infrastructure. And here you can see the circle of digitalization that we are considering, where cities and regions, cities and communities, having already a number of data that they own. There are new data emerging out of the so-called IoT space, and through our UI connector architecture, we're able to take the data out, putting it on an open urban data platform, which we call UI Urban Pulse, provide the transparency to communities, cities, and regions in order to generate then new smart services and new business models. And among this approach, one of it that we were tackling, and we are tackling in the context of ELENA, is the question of electrification of fleets in cities. And how do we do the transformation from internal combustion engine cars into a more sustainable, electrified, ideally based on renewable energy infrastructure. That led to the idea of an ELENA proposal. It was actually formed during a General Assembly of the European Innovation Partnership I was talking about, and a presentation given by EIB, where they announced to open up the idea of EIB also to private entities, specifically small and medium enterprises. Reinhard briefly referred to that. And we had been among the first that have tried to propose something of that kind as SMEs. There was a question about how to combine smaller projects to package it. That was exactly what we did. And our initial ambition was to pull together around 2,000 electric vehicles, fully electric vehicles, including their charging infrastructure, and to roll it out initially in these 5 countries listed. The project is called HELLO, for High Volume Electric Vehicle Procurement. The partners in the UK is our sister company called Urban Integrated, where they're looking for corporate car sharing in the context of Oxford City Council, and where it's about sharing these both around the council organizations, but also with others like the University of Oxford and so forth. This is part of the overall ambitions of Oxford to have a zero emission approach, and fleet sharing as a means to reduce the total numbers of cars in the city. So that was the ambition. This is the ambition that we have currently in the UK. One of the outcomes there was that the charging infrastructure is of critical essence, and that the parking situation in a typical British village and town such as Oxford does not allow easily to do charging on street curve. And so the idea of park and charging infrastructures on private and public parking lots has become a very vital and core element to the thinking to implement this ambition goal. In the Netherlands, our partner is Good Moves. Their ambition is in the region of Brabant and the region of Limburg to support both the public administration as well as housing companies in their intent. This is a true subscription-based model where the fleets are being managed in a way that they are shared service elements. So we have two dimensions of savings. Number one is change into electrification with renewables. Secondly is sharing the cars among different entities and to create an environment of an overall reduction on vehicles on the street. Our partner in France, particularly in the Ile-de-France, is Clem, who's looking into car sharing from a perspective of not the inner center, but really more on the outer boundaries, rural areas as it's being called here, and to empower local authorities to provide electrified car sharing to its citizens in an easy, consumable way. And they have been extremely successful over the concourse of this project to establish more cars into these business models. And finally, the urban mobility innovations, the company in Germany that I'm heading, which is also in charge as the single beneficiary to create a solution for corporate fleets and municipality fleets. And we had been focusing on mobility as a service, as a one-stop approach with a very important aspect of removing obstacles so that e-mobility becomes a consumable good. Now, that led to four aspects that I'd like to share with the project, the challenges, the lessons learned, the advantages, and the conclusions. First of all, this is what we achieved. You can see we have about 330 cars as of today, out of the 2,000 anticipated, but we see a significant difference in charging infrastructure. Why is this the case? The lessons learned during the project was that cities have to be first prepared on the charging infrastructures before they release investments for cars. And throughout the concourse of this project, which now lasts for 2 years, we changed the ambition from to have a more focus on charging infrastructure. Now, the challenges that we had was among the program, this is summarized here. There is a significant more detailed reporting than in other H2020 projects. That's the challenge we have been facing, because these are different reportings we had to learn about. The program was originally not designed for SMEs, so there have been a couple of things that has caused quite substantial effort. Among that is the issue of bank guarantee that's being required. So whoever wants to go that path, being an SME, that is something to consider. And joint procurement across 4 countries has turned out to be a significant major obstacle, much more difficult than we originally anticipated. The lessons learned is that we had more project management activities than we expected. The upside is we were able to support initiatives that we haven't anticipated at the beginning. So the flexibility of the program in collaboration with the EIB is there. So the advantages is we could start from very different stages and positions in these countries. Also, you could see that we dropped, one partner dropped, which was the Spanish partner. It was acquired by SEAT and was not anymore an SME and stepped out of it. And we still were able, with the remaining 4 partners, to work on it. So the conclusion is the program is sufficiently flexible to take into account specific challenges also of different countries. So that's truly possible, but you have to consider that there's an overall project management effort that exceeds, at least for us, significantly other H2020 projects we are used to. That's about, in a very brief, what we have achieved. Returning back to Ricardo.
Now we will enter the question and answer session. Stefan identified some questions. Stefan, maybe you want to read them out loud.
Sure, yes. Just a first question to Carlo. So when did you actually compute the leverage factor? You explained how you computed, but is it something that you had to put into the proposal?
Yes, here I am. Okay, so the leverage factor must be calculated at the end of the project. So together with the final report, you have to show the leverage factor obtained during the 3 or 4 years of your ELENA project. Therefore, the final goal is to arrive at least at 20 at the end of the project, together with the final report. Every year you have to make, every 6 months, you have to make 2 different reports. So you start with an exception report at the beginning of the project. Then you have a biannual report every 6 months. You have a middle term report and the final report. So the final leverage factor is in the final report. And the leverage factor, as I told you before, should be 20 times the expenses used on ELENA funds. ELENA funds normally finance 90% of the expenses. I don't know if it is currently like this. Mr. Six for sure knows about that, but normally it's 90%. So regarding the 10%, no matter, it doesn't form the leverage factor as a cost. So if you spend 1 million on ELENA funds, you have to have in your mind that you have to obtain investment at least for 20 million.
Okay.
This is how it works.
Thank you.
But you don't have to be scared about this. It's absolutely something that all the projects has achieved without big problems and without big headaches regarding this matter. Problems could come from other sides. I never seen in our projects problems coming from the leverage factor, excluding Milano, that was the pilot project. In this case, the situation was very tough, as I told you before, but we did it also in Milan. So don't worry about the leverage factor.
Okay, thank you. Lutz, what was the leverage rate for the Hello project? Did you?
Yeah, so as Reinhard mentioned, for sustainable urban transport or mobility, the leverage factor is 10. The project is in its final period till the end of October to finish. The planned outcome is something between 10 and 12, could be more. And certainly the shift was from vehicles to infrastructure, which we had to, of course, negotiate with EIB, but was in line with the overall intent as Reinhard laid out, and with an appropriate amendment on the contract. This was we were able to achieve that. As Carlo rightfully said, don't worry too much about the leverage factor. We were at the beginning very worried and thought we'll never be able to make it and have to be very careful. It seems now we're exceeding it. We don't know exactly where. So as time goes on, if you are doing the right thing, you will see you can leverage more investment than you originally anticipated. I share that with Carlo.
Okay, thank you. So Reinhard, a number of questions have been asked, and we so one is basically a confirmation. So the ELENA success is an indirect success, since ELENA finances the preparation for investment programs only. That was pretty much asking for a confirmation. And there was another question, if there's an implementation obligation, what happens when the feasibility study paid by ELENA shows that the idea is not feasible? What would your answer be?
Well, indeed, I mean, ELENA is not supporting directly through grants the investment. So the capital expenditure needs to be financed, but ELENA helps you to find the good financing also. I mean, you can use you can have financial advisors involved, paid by ELENA, to find the best financing means for financing scheme for an investment. So this is, I think, indeed, this is clear that ELENA is only for, if I may say so, software, not for the hardware. Indeed, the second question is going in an interesting direction. Basically, what we, and I think this is also comes a little bit out of the messages from Carlo and from Lutz, that the evaluation is done on a portfolio basis. So you, as the final beneficiary, you have to see and to strive that you get projects through to the investment. There might be some which drops out, but then you need to compensate by others. And that's why we also ask in general, when you submit a project for sustainable energy, we want to see a leverage factor at least of 25. And for mobility, clean mobility, want to see at least 15, so that there is a kind of margin, because this 10 and 20 is the contractual obligation. So this is really the hard one at the end of the project. So that's why it's important to have this in mind.
So next question, I mean, Lutz answered it already. You actually brought together smaller partners to a big project, so that explained very well. Again, another question for Reinhard. Do you require best value for money principle for the selection of experts, meaning multiple offers or anything? What are the requirements?
Yeah, just wanted to come back to the first question, to the question before. I mean, because I think this is also, I forgot a little bit to insist on this. ELENA is not a usual Horizon 2020 project where you have the obligation to have multiple, or to have at least partners from 3 countries, etc. This was the choice by the Hello Consortium, which I think is also a challenge in itself to have cross-country cooperations, and I think this has to be acknowledged, and that this was an additional difficulty, I think, to handle, to manage. But when you look at the projects, basically it's only from one city or from one region the final beneficiary, because we know that it's difficult to support investments, and cross-country cooperation is not necessarily an advantage. I mean, you should be inspired and use the ideas and examples which exist elsewhere, but ELENA supports really an entity in one country, and you don't have to set up any complicated, well, not complicated, but international or cross-country cooperations. Okay. Regarding the applicable procedures for using external experts, basically we are also we have the same obligation which are also presented in Horizon 2020. Because it's financed by this, so you need to have this approach, best value for money principle, also for if you hire external experts. For public entities, anyhow, they have to go through the public procurement process. For private entities, it's a little bit different, but you have to show that you made a choice.
Okay, thank you. Last question for all the speakers. Would you, I guess you would make available your presentations for the participants?
Yes.
Okay. And Ricardo will send the presentations to the participants or make them available. Is that right, Ricardo?
That is correct. All participants will receive a follow-up email with the relevant links where you will find further information and the presentation of the speakers.
Yeah, there's one last question. Of course, are Swiss entities eligible for participation? Yes, of course. That was that's an important information. Yes, you are able to participate. Until now, no, there was little interest. I hope that changes after this webinar. Before we conclude, and I have to cut the question and answer session here. Of course, we will be able to answer all the questions and maybe transfer the difficult questions to the speakers. And don't hesitate to contact us at any time. I assume now my presentation is visible. Is that right? Ricardo, can you see my presentation? Is it shared?
We still see the questions.
Okay,
page.
sure. Yeah. That's fine. And because I just want to quickly, very briefly, remind you about other funding opportunities in the energy domain. There's nothing open in the transport work program anymore. And here are a list of topics in the energy work program that is still open with deadlines in September. And there's more. There's another slide. I don't go into detail here, but you will, of course, get the presentation, and you can click on this link, which leads you directly to the participant portal or the funding and tender portal, where you can get more information. And don't hesitate to contact me if you need advice about these and how to apply if you decide to do so. There's another funding opportunity in Horizon 2020, the Green Deal call. And there's about €1 billion available for 20 topics in 11 call areas. And the publication and opening of the call will be in mid-September. And you have some time to find partners. And there are also partnering events for that. And the deadline will be January 2021. So look at the topics, see if you are interested. The preliminary topics are published already, but the budget is lacking, so we don't know how much the EU contribution for each topic would be. But again, don't hesitate to contact us if you have questions. I've always the question about Horizon Europe, and this is the new pillar structure, and I wouldn't expect too many deadlines at really the beginning of the year. 2021, we'll see. Again, the Green Deal call is still Horizon 2020, even if it goes into 2021. But keep looking at our website, and there we publish information about Horizon Europe. And as soon as we have as soon as topics are published, we will of course inform you. So that pretty much sums up what I wanted to say. Thank you again for participating. Thank you particularly for the speakers, and we are looking forward to meeting you at other occasions. And we are always here for your questions. Thanks a lot.